High build primers, one of the fastest and most efficient ways to finish your 3D print. But which one is the best? Well, today, we'll find out.
It's a war of attrition, I feed on the friction, and I will be the last one standing!
Alright, what's up everyone? Back at it again. It is DW Darkwing Dad. I want to thank you for stopping by and checking out today's video. If it's your first time here and you're a big fan of 3D printing like I am, make sure to click that subscribe button. Come back and see me. Got a bunch of videos you're not going to want to miss. But in today's video, I'm going to be showcasing a head-to-head battle with some of the best high build primers you can use to help you finish your 3D prints and see which one reigns supreme. Now you might be asking, a high build primer, what's that? High build primers are a lot different than just your normal sandable or filler primers. And without me getting into a 5-minute escapade on what these primers are, they're basically filler primers on steroids. In a sense, they're a low-grade spray putty that offer better, more efficient filling with simple use and easy cleanup. Now, to many, high build primers are nothing new. In fact, I've used many of them in my videos and showcase how awesome they work, but I found a few new ones to add to the mix, and we're gonna put them to the test. I'm going to break down each primer, put them through some unique tests and comparison, and rate them on a scale from 1 to 10 on how good or bad they perform. Make sure to stick around to the end of the video as I will give you my final ranking and see just which primer gets the DW seal of approval. Well, let's get this test rolling and take a look at the primers and get spraying. Let's go. So today we're going to be testing 4 high build primers head to head, right? Okay, well, let's take a look. First up is the Raptor 1K Pro. Next is the Upol Fantastic Professional. After that is SEM High Build Primer. And lastly, we see Custom Shop's Custom Coat Primer. Looking at these one by one and suggested use here, and spoiler, all these primers have similar suggested use, but each of these do have different dry and flash times when they can be sanded, and that will be one of the comparisons we do, but our first comparison test is going to be the availability and pricing test. So first up, the Raptor 1K. If you live in the US, you'll love this because Raptor is carried at all AutoZones. You can get this product both in-store and on AutoZone's website online. No Amazon yet, but who doesn't have an AutoZone nearby? This is a 10-ounce aerosol that will run you $17.99, so that's $179 per ounce. And they'll often have discounts and BOGO deals, especially online, so you can potentially get this a little bit cheaper. But because of the great in-store availability and the price per ounce, the Raptor gets a 9.5. Next up, the Upol Fantastic. This is another one you can find both locally in-store and online through O'Reilly's Auto. What's great is O'Reilly's is available in all 50 states, including Canada, so that's a big plus. They do carry their old version of this on Amazon, which is called Upol High Build 5. The downside to that is it's anywhere from $2 to $4 more, so that's really up to you if you want to buy that. I assume it's only a matter of time before this current version hits Amazon, but this primer here, it comes in a 12-ounce aerosol. It's a little steep in price. It will run you anywhere from $23.99 all the way up to $27. That's an average price of around $2 per ounce. So great overall availability, however, not as good of a deal on the price per ounce. So Upol gets a score of an 8.5. And our next primer on the list is the SEM High Build Primer. Now, this one is a bit unique based on your location. First off, yes, it's on Amazon, so that's great. But depending on where you live, if you have any auto body and paint supply stores, you may be able to get it locally. Even O'Reilly's offers it, but it's really overpriced, so I would avoid that route. This primer here is widely distributed online. In addition to Amazon, you can find these primers as low as $19.99 on a ton of different websites like TCP Global, Eastwood, JB Tools, and more. Now, this primer comes in a massive 16-ounce aerosol, which is only about $1.53 or less, depending on where you get it. Now, I know there's some variables in local availability, but based on the price per ounce, the 2-day Amazon shipping, and the wide variety of online availability, SEM gets a score of a 9. And last is the Custom Coat Primer. Very similar to SEM. You might be able to find this at a specialty shop locally. I was only able to find it online. TCP Global, of course, Amazon, even Walmart has it, which is pretty great. Because if you have Walmart Plus, you can actually get it shipped in like a day or two. So that's pretty cool. Comes in a 12-ounce can. Everything I've seen, though, it's pretty much $22.99, which totals out to about $1.91 per ounce. So although Custom Coat has a decent price per ounce, Their local availability is pretty much non-existent for many, and you're at the mercy of online ordering only. So for that, I'm rating custom coat at an 8.25. So moving right along into our next test, here simply I'm going to show how each one of these spray and rate them 1 through 10. I'll do 2 sprays and then a single spray to see just how well the coverage and thickness of each primer is. So this one here is the coverage and spray test. So first and foremost here, all of these primers have the same exact nozzle, so spray type will be pretty much even across the board. When spraying, I'll apply the same pressure to each nozzle, keep the same distance, try to keep everything even-steven. All of these primers say shake well for 1 minute, so we'll do just that and have a look. First on the block here is the Raptor 1K, and you can see with 2 sprays, it definitely has both good coverage and it comes out pretty thick. Even on a single spray, you can see how good the coverage is on this one and how thick it comes out. Really, no complaints here. Wide coverage and thick on the spray. The Raptor gets a perfect score of a 10. Next up here is going to be the Upol. So on the spray here, pretty good coverage. It's a nice wide fan, but it comes out very thin. Now, this can still be a good thing. As I've always said, multiple light coats is better than just caking something on. You can furthermore see how thin it is with the single spray, which ultimately having to spray and then wait more often can lead to lost time on your project, which of course we all hate. Regardless, the Upol had good coverage, but a thinner spray. So overall in this one, I'm going to give the Upol a rating of a 7.5. Next, we have the SEM high build, so we can see right off the bat a lot smaller of a coverage area, so kind of iffy about that. But again, depending on your project, that might be a pro or a con. The thickness of the spray is thicker than the Upol, and it's pretty close to the Raptor. But that small coverage area, I'm still on the fence about. But this could be a very good controllable primer. So overall, based on coverage area and thickness of the spray, I'm rating the SEM at an 8. Lastly here, we have the custom coat, and by spraying, you can see again, it's kind of a mix between the Upol and the SEM. It's got some solid coverage. It's thicker than Upol, not as thick as SEM, so you can kind of see why you do these tests. It's cool to see the results side by side. All in all, this is kind of a combination of the last two based on just how they sprayed and laid. So overall, I'm giving custom coat a score of an 8. Now, there's really only so much you can tell by spraying on some cardboard, so we're going to actually be spraying these on 2 helmets. We'll see how well it applies. We'll look and see if there's any runs, fisheyes, or hiccups as we apply these to the model. Now, this test here is going to be piggybacked immediately into 2 other tests where we'll test to see how soon these can be sanded based off their wait time, and we'll also see how well they fill in the defects once sanding begins. But let's see just how well these apply on some 3D models now. This is the control and application test. So you can see these models have not been sanded and they definitely have some defects, so pretty excited to see how each of these primers do. Since both the Raptor and the SEM have a 60-minute wait time, we'll do those on these side, and the Custom Shop and the Upol have similar wait times at 30 minutes and 15 minutes, so we'll keep those together on the right. I applied all the primers to both helmets to fully determine my ratings, and here's how they did. First off, spraying the Raptor. The control is pretty good, but because this comes out heavier and thicker, you definitely need to be careful how thick your coats are. Do not overdo it or get the nozzle too close. If you cake this stuff on, you're definitely going to have some solvent pop, some fisheyes. You're going to have to wait a lot longer to sand, and you're just going to be wasting your time. You can see here the stuff comes out heavily. Luckily, all these are solvent-based, and they dry relatively quick. With the Raptor, there's definitely a learning curve because of how heavy it comes out. Might be intimidating to some, and if you have a model with a lot of detail, again, you need to be very careful with how you apply this. Once you get used to it, though, it really is a great primer. All in all, because it does come out pretty heavy and control can be limiting, I'm giving the Raptor a 7.5. Next is the SEM High build. This definitely comes out a lot more controllable, and honestly, I like this application a lot more than the Raptor. However, you must shake this can really, really good. You can see here, I did shake it for a minute, but obviously I did not shake it enough and all the filling agents clumped up. No worry though, I simply shook it longer, did a test spray on the other helmet, and everything went great. So that instance wasn't so much a knock on the application, but more or less, a tip for preparation and spraying. Shake the heck out of that can really good before you use it. But overall, I really like how the SEM applied, seeing how it lays on the model and the ability to control the amount and the direction of the spray. Just a lot more controllable. Really like the SEM, so I'm giving it a 9. So moving right along into the Upol, we knew this one came out kind of thin, but had really good coverage area. And honestly, I was surprised. It sprays really nice. Because it comes out thinner, you can apply it a little bit heavier in multiple coats, and there's really no issues. This is just one of those situations where you can determine how heavy you want it applied because it sprays so thin, which really is kind of nice. So what I thought was going to be bad actually turned out to be pretty good. I love the control. I love the application on the Upol, so I'm scoring this one a 9. And finally is the custom coat primer, and this one I really liked. It comes out thicker than Upol and Sem, but it has a lot more of a control factor to it. I'm able to get in little nooks and fine detailed areas with no runs or no major issues. I think this had the best spray control, and even when I put it on a little bit thicker, there was no running, there was no fish eyes, no solvent pop, anything like that. Definitely like this one the most, so I'm scoring it a 9.25. So after 3 tests, here's how we're looking on the leaderboard. So I mentioned all these primers have a dry and sanding window. Well, let's test how accurate all of these actually are. Both the Raptor and the Sem have a 60-minute wait to time sand, while the Upol is 30 minutes and the custom shop is 15. So let's rate the manufacturer wait time, then the actual wait time. We'll average them together and see which one comes out on top. First, let's test custom shop. The initial 15-minute window is awesome, especially compared to the other high builds. 15 minutes is nothing. I mean, that's literally like filler primer area. So that definitely gets a 10 right off the bat. I waited 15 minutes to sand, and boom, it sands just fine. Custom shop lives up to exactly what it says. So because it's a quicker sand time than anything else, I'm giving it some bonus points here of 11, giving the total average of custom shop a 10.5. Next up here is going to be the Upol, and Upol has a 30-minute sand window, which isn't too terrible. So my initial rating of that, I'm going to give it an 8.5. Now I'm being brave and sanding the Upol here at 20 minutes with 320, and to my surprise, no issues. This could be because of that thinner application or simply because I'm in a warmer climate and understand, yes, heat and humidity play a huge role, but here in Florida in the mid-80s, it was fine at 20 minutes. So because it overdid what it said, brownie points for the Upol, I'm bumping the sand window to 10.5, giving the total average score of Upol 9.5. So now jumping right into our longer drying high builds, Sem gives a wait time of 60 minutes. And to some, this can really be a motivational killer, especially if you're working on one piece. I know many putties and filler primers, they can be sanded around the 15 and 20 minute mark, but understand that these high builds were completely different. They have specific components and ingredients that just need longer to dry depending on the chemical composition. But here on the Sem high build with that 60-minute window, the initial rating, I'm gonna go with 7. Now, after applying the Sem high build, letting it sit, inspecting it here, the feel, the texture, it seems like it's cured and ready. And we're only at about 38 minutes, but I'm going to give it a go. And sure enough, it sands just fine. And that's really great to see. And again, why proper application is so important. Do not load these on. Make sure you give proper time in between coats, and you'll get results just like this. So due to the fact that we can sand the Sem a lot earlier than its recommended window, again, I'm giving it some bonus points here. So its new dry time window, I'm rating it 11, giving the Sem a total average score of a 9. Lastly, the Raptor 1K. Again, this has a 60-minute wait recommended time. So based on that window, I am giving it a 7. Now, we did see how thick this comes out. I wanted to test it though, so I started sanding it at 45 minutes. To my surprise, it was okay, but what I noticed is it started stripping the primer off and gouging a lot more than the other high builds. This is a clear indicator that it's not fully cured and bonded to the plastic. So I waited another 5 minutes, and you can see it's leveling off a little bit better, not being stripped as bad, which is good. So although we couldn't cut down a ton of time on the Raptor, it's okay because we want good results, and we briefly seen that from the sanding. All in all, it's a minor upgrade from the Raptor being able to shave the 10 minutes off, so it's a slight improvement, but because we know and we've seen how thick that Raptor comes out, I really wouldn't recommend sanding this any sooner than that 50 to 60 minute window that I just showed you here. So overall, because it's a borderline improvement, I'll give the Raptor an 8, leaving its total average to a 7.5. So a pretty cool test there, and really happy to say that all the primers did exactly what they said based on sand time or better. So now that we caught a small glimpse of what these primers can do when being sanded, what if it's a model that we can't really sand? Well, next up, we're going to be testing out some self-filling abilities. This is the self-filling test. So as I just mentioned, sometimes there's models we print like figurines, bust, or intricate parts that we can't really sand. I'm personally not a big fan of resin because you're fighting gravity. It can load up in certain areas and cause loss of definition. Acetone smoothing, you're more or less just melting the model and disfiguring it. So a quality high build primer that you can just spray a few coats on and gently fill in those layer lines without sanding can really be a lifesaver. So what I did here is took 2 identical models and applied 3 coats of the high build primers and compared them side by side. I did a basic front area of an Iron Man mask and some overhang areas to really test the self-filling abilities, and here's what I came up with. Looking at the model here, the top right we applied the custom shop primer, the inner right we applied the SEM. The inner left, we applied Raptor. The outer left, we applied Upol. These in-between parts were left unsprayed to get a really good side-by-side comparison, and then I sprayed it with just regular black primer to show its true integrity. So first we'll start off by looking at the Upol on the far left and the Raptor on the right, and at first glance, it looks pretty good. You can see some of those finer layer lines have definitely been filled in compared to the before pictures. But my eye is already picking up on more filling from the Raptor, as you can briefly see on the right side. You can see it even more as you change the angle and the light. The Raptor has definitely done a better job than the Upol. And look at this hard filling line it's created from the tape. That's pretty wild. Just in this shot here, you can still see some faint layer lines on the Upol, whereas the Raptor, it's almost totally filled in all those layer lines. Even that heavy banding defect is filled in a lot more and rounded off on the Raptor side versus the Upol. So a pretty interesting side-by-side comparison there, but let's check out the other two before we rate these. Here we've got the SEM primer on the left and the custom shop on the right. And again, wow, look how much it filled in. On these certain angles here, you can really see how much both of these primers filled in with absolutely no sanding. Checking out these shots here side by side, it's really hard to determine which one did better, but checking back on the other side, I think we can clearly tell that the Upol didn't have quite as strong of a self-filling abilities as the other ones we see here. Comparing it to the SEM and the custom coat, it just filled in a ton of those layer lines. A lot of those were really, really deep too. But before we rate these self-filling abilities, let's circle back and check out those overhangs, because a lot of those were really, really chewed up, and those are going to really help us determine the best filling abilities on all of these primers. So first up, let's check out custom coat. Here is a quick before shot. You can see there's some gaps between the layers along with some definitive separation on the top layer. And now the after. Man, that is nice. Absolutely no sanding, and it filled in a ton considering how bad the gaps were and how smooth it is now. That's a big turnaround. So based on how well we've seen the custom coat fill in on the front of the mask, making those layer lines almost vanish, and how well it cleaned up those sloppy overhangs, from what I've seen from custom coat, it gets a score of a 9.25. Next up is the Upol, and first getting a quick glimpse of that overhang area. Oof. That is a little rough there. So now after applying it, you can see the after picture. Nice. It actually surprised me how well it did filling, considering how bad that area was. It did a really great job. Now on the front of the mask, it definitely didn't fill quite as good as the others, which it's kind of weird. It did really good on a chewed up area of an overhang, but not as good as the front of the mask. I feel like the layer lines are just more recognized on the front of the mask. The Upol definitely had the most layer lines showing out of all the other primers. I feel like it did a good job on the overhangs, so not too bad of a performance considering the model, but overall I'm rating Upol's self-filling ability at an 8.5. All right, so now we have the SEM high build and giving you a quick look at the before. Again, wow, there are gaps and separation on this overhang. This might have been one of the worst ones. It was printed on a Bowden setup. That might have something to do with it. Regardless, looking at the after, definitely filling in a ton. The amount it's filling in is very impressive. A filler primer wouldn't even touch this. You would definitely need to sand it or use putty, something like that. So really great results here from these high builds. The SEM did an awesome job on the faceplate as well. Side by side with the custom coat, very tough to determine a winner. But on the SEM, because of how great it did on the front of the mask and the solid cleanup it did on the overhangs, I'm giving it a rating of a 9. And lastly here, the Raptor 1K. Again, a quick look at the overhang. Woof, that is some rough stuff, but after a couple coats here, Looking at the after, wow, it filled in a ton. And that'll be a nice, easy cleanup after some sanding. So for this overhang, it did an awesome job. Same can be said for the front of the mask. It filled in those imperfections great. When sprayed properly, it just lays and fills so good, and I think it's attested to the thickness of the spray. So all in all, the Raptor, for its self-filling abilities, might have done the best. I'm giving it a 9.5. So kind of a cool little test there where we can see the self-filling abilities of all these primers and which one really would be a good candidate for using it on bus and intricate areas and things like that. But as we begin to approach the finale of our test, let's take a look at what most of you really wanted to see, and that's the filling abilities of these primers once sanded. So in this test here, we did something different, and we never initially sanded the model. Most primers recommend to sand first with 180 or 220, but I went right into applying it so we could see how well these primers actually fill. To me, anybody can take 80 grit and sand the heck out of a model, but if you can reduce sanding, why not, right? Especially when it comes to intricate and hard to reach areas, these high builds can be really beneficial and cut down on having to sand as much. On top of that, by reducing sanding, you're saving time, frustration, fatigue, and helping keep the integrity and detail of your model. So let's get right into it. This is the sanding and filling test. So I sanded all the models with something kind of light duty in 320 and 400. So first up is the SEM high build. I've got a few angles to show you here, but the SEM sanded very easily. It didn't clump up or clog the sandpaper, and it does create a good amount of dust, but you're going to get that with a good filling agents in the primer. The primer didn't gouge too bad, and it finishes very smooth with the 400, as you can see here. You can also see just how well it's filling, especially in the sunlight. Now, once I'm done, I'm going to hit the whole helmet with black, and we'll get them a final rating. But early on, the SEM seems to be feeling really great and is looking good. Next up is the Raptor 1K. Sanding it, again, it sands very easy. It does produce a decent amount of dust. You can see it does have some very light gouging, but good news, it was leveled off very easily with the 400. It's still filling in very good, especially some of those deeper defects and gaps that we see. It's definitely a good sign. It didn't clump up or clog the sandpaper and was really easy to sand and work with. Thumbs up for the Raptor. All right, and moving right along to the Upol Fantastic. This one so far seemed to sand the easiest, the most effortless. It also seemed to produce the most amount of dust. And what I'm getting at with all these is make sure you're wearing PPE. You do not want to be breathing that stuff in, especially just sanding it by hand. You know, there's a lot of dust producer. If you're using a palm sander or something like that, it's definitely going to sling some dust up, so make sure you are wearing your protective equipment. Oddly, it didn't really gouge the primer much at all, which again is a good sign. No clumping on the sandpaper, and just like the Raptor, you can kind of see that filament bleeding through, getting stripped off those high spots, but importantly, filling in those low spots, which is really, really good. Upol seems like it's filling in quite well, but we really won't know how it does until we get those black coats on. So let's move on to see how well the custom coat did. And lastly, the custom coat. Now, out of all four, this one definitely sanded the most effortlessly. It just felt smooth. There was no clumping, no gouging. I could tell right away this one was filling in the best. There's certain products that I guess I could say I like to use, or in a primer's case, I like to spray, I like to sand, etc. Custom Shop definitely is. It's a very good sign here from Custom Shop. So this one really, going through all the tests, it's really hitting all the numbers here. I really like the Custom Shop. But to keep things even, I did a second round of sanding for all the primers. A lot of times when you're sanding and that dust builds up, it's really hard to see, is it filling, is it not filling? So wiped them, prepped the model, and did a coat of non-filling black primer to really see how well they did. So let's take a look at the results and get rating all these. So you can see how adding a coat of black really will help you identify defects when sanding, and that's a big tip there. But let's look more closely at all these primers, starting off with the Raptor. So from a distance, it looks really good. You can clearly see the area we sanded, but you can still see there's some very, very faint ghosting layer lines left. But it did fill in very well, especially on this hard line right here. And you can see it finished with no gouging, and that's very, very important. Ultimately, the Raptor did really good considering the quality of the print. Another coat or two of the Raptor with sanding and those layer lines will be totally gone. Taking in the user-friendliness of sanding and the direct results from the before and after, I think the Raptor did a pretty solid job, and I'm giving it an overall score of an 8.5. Next here, we're taking a look at SEM and not shying away immediately. I can tell this filled in better than the Raptor. You don't see those faint ghosting like layer lines, and you can tell immediately where we didn't sand. Just like the Raptor, though, no gouging, finishes super, super smooth, which is really great. And even those deep banding defects are gone. In my opinion, a bit of an upgrade from the Raptor based on the results here, so I'm giving the SEM a score of a 9.25. Next is the Upol Fantastic. Now this one sanded super easy and it seemed to fill everything in, but again, once you hit it with that black, you can really see the difference. Lots of ghosting layer line showing here, and even on those heavy defects where we spent a little bit more time in the corners, they weren't even close to being fully filled in. You know, there are a lot of pros to this Upol, but this is a primer that, you know, you're basically going to have to sand, primer, sand, and repeat a few times to really get the results that you want. You know, still no gouging on the Upol, which is great. Finishing is super easy, but the Upol definitely lacks the filling capabilities of our two previous primers. So not too shabby based on the results, but overall, I'm going to rate the Upol at a 7.5. And last is the Custom Shop. And other than this obnoxious, huge banding clog defect across the front, look how good it filled. The finishing on this was great, no gouging whatsoever. And comparing it specifically next to the Raptor, the custom coat definitely did better. There might have been a very tiny bit of ghosting, but again, that top part, it was really rough. There was some separation, some gaps, and still nowhere near as visible as a Raptor. This is a primer where you can simply apply sand, and you're done, which is really, really great to see. You don't have to do multiple times of going over it. I think 2 rounds of applying and sanding with this, you're going to get great results from this. Definitely a bonus for sure. This was a rough print too, and to be fair, all of these did very impressive considering there was no prep and sanding done before application. I definitely like the Custom Shop primer a lot. This was my first time using it, but definitely not the last. And because Custom Coat did such a good job, I am rating this one a score of a 9. So now, after 6 rounds of testing, let's take a look at the leaderboard. Coming in 4th with a score of 8.41, the Upol Fantastic. Coming in 3rd with a score of 8.75, kind of a shocker, the Raptor 1K. Coming in 2nd with a score of 8.87, the SEM High Build, meaning the highest overall rated primer here today is the Custom Shop with a 9.04. So pretty cool to see all these primers go head-to-head and see just how well they rate. Are these standings going to show? Well, what I'm going to do is give you my final thoughts on all these primers and let you know which one you should pick for your next project and why. All right, guys. Well, there you have it. There is a look at the head-to-head battle that I had with some awesome high build primers. Models that I showed you on, these models were really rough. You know, they had clogging issues, banding issues, and how well they cleaned them up was very, very impressive. So it is a testament to what these primers are capable of, and definitely why you should look into using these. You know, you can see that just with a couple coats and no sanding at all, how much it filled in, and then when we actually did sand, the end results. Absolutely remarkable from each one of these. Definitely recommend looking into utilizing high build primers for all your projects. So obviously we've seen my initial ratings and how well all these high build primers do. Let's get into my final ratings and which one is the best of the best and why. So at number 4 here we have the Upol Fantastic. So no change in the standings on this one. No, it got an original score of an 8.41 based on testing. There's a lot of pros and cons that weigh this. You know, getting into the cons, first and foremost, is the price. You know, it had the highest price per ounce. This stuff is going to run you anywhere from $24 to $28 depending on how you get it. You know, secondly was the filling ability. Obviously, it didn't do bad, but it did not do anywhere near as well as some of the other high build primers. So this is something where you very well may have to do an initial sanding on the model, then apply the primer, then sand, then apply the primer again. You can see where I'm going with this. It can really just be a time killer. Of course, depending on your model, it may suit your needs perfect. The pros, local availability. There's O'Reilly's pretty much everywhere in the United States. If you're in a pinch, you can just drive down the road and get it. It did spray and control very good. Those light coats actually did come in, you know, pretty beneficial. And the dry time, you know, that 20 to 30 minute window. For me, I was able to get it done in 20 minutes, and quicker dry time was very nice. And obviously it sanded and finished very well too. So not knocking it, just was up against some stiff competition. But for the Upol Fantastic, I am going to give it a final rating of an 8.5. So moving on to our third ranked high build primer, it is still the Raptor 1K. So this one is of course near and dear to my heart. Honestly, I'm kind of shocked, but that's why I do tests like this. The Raptor, it does have a lot of pros and cons. The initial rating on the Raptor was an 8.75. You know, going over the cons, you know, obviously we've seen how thick and heavy it comes out, and to many that can be very intimidating. Depending on your model, maybe it will fill in too much, or it may create a run, which is just going to backside you. You know what I mean? You know, the biggest thing that affects the rating on this is that dry window. You know, 50 to 60 minutes minimum. When I have to wait up to an hour, you know, that could really be a motivational killer. To me, when I'm working on a project, I have a very small window of time before it is 1,000 degrees out, and it's tough to spray and it's tough to sand. So having to wait, you know, 50, 60 minutes can really put a hinder on my day. That's definitely a downer to using this product. However, again, local availability, it's at AutoZone. AutoZones are everywhere. Price per ounce, it's only $17.99, $179 an ounce. Very good price per ounce. It still feels really, really good. You know, I have used this in helmets in the past. You may have seen some of those videos, and the results were absolutely awesome. So I'm definitely not knocking overall quality of the Raptor, but there are some cons that definitely do hinder its overall performance. But still a really, really great primer, especially if you're in a pinch. If you want something that's a little bit better than the Upol, Raptor is definitely a way to go. And for all those reasons, I am bumping the Raptor score from an 8.75 to an 8.9. All right, now coming in second place, are we going to have a change in the standings? Well, the number 2 primer in today's test is the Sem High Build. So no, the standings did not change. The Sem High Build, you know, in all honesty, this is an amazing high build primer. There's really not a lot of cons to this. And quite frankly, this is actually available locally to me. However, it's about a 35-40 minute drive. Probably not going to drive over an hour to get it. I would probably just deal with driving 10-12 minutes down the road and getting the Raptor or the Upol. I would say the only downside to this primer was the wait time, 38 to 40 minutes. I just like things that dry a little bit faster, but it's definitely worth the wait time. As far as pros go, love the spraying ability, love the control, love how it sanded, loved how it finished. Obviously, we did see though, this does have some heavy filling agents, so make sure you shake it really good. Self-filling abilities, everything that this primer has to offer, it is definitely an awesome, awesome primer. One thing that I didn't mention, it is acrylic based, so it is very, very durable. That's another perk for it. Definitely an awesome, awesome primer. Now the Sem got an initial score of an 8.87, but based on everything I told you here, I'm bumping the Sem up to a 9.15. So that means the number 1 primer of today's test is, of course, Custom Shop Custom Code. So the reason I rank this one number 1 is everything about this primer I absolutely loved. The only downside to it was having to get it online. But I can tell you, if you have a big project, if you want something where there is minimal wait time, where it sprays easy, it sands easy, it finishes easy, just everything about this high build primer I love. Out of the 4 here, it was the one I enjoyed the most. It dried the fastest, sanded the easiest. In my opinion, it filled pretty much just as good as the Sem. The Sem might have filled in a little bit better, but again, that 10 to 15 minute sand window, that just As much as this fills, that blows me away. Time-wise, even an extra coat of this is still going to get done faster than the SEM. Because of all the pros and the minimal cons with the custom coat, I am giving it the DW seal of approval and a final score of a 9.35. Well, that is a wrap on the high build test video. I hope you guys enjoyed this one, and if you did, please go ahead and give me a thumbs up. If you've used any of these primers or have any questions on any of these primers, please drop me a comment in the comment section. If you do enjoy all things 3D printing, cosplay, DIY builds, comparison tests like this, make sure to click that subscribe button and come back and see me. I know you guys love these comparison tests. It's one thing that I kind of built the channel on. This test took long. I know this is a long video here, but doing all the testing, all the editing, it took forever. But very, very happy to bring this to you guys. So again, I hope you did like the video. And the good news is I am doing the filler primer test volume 2. You know, hopefully you guys seen that filler primer test volume 1. Well, I've got a whole list of new ones. I know I did a teaser video for it, but unfortunately some of those primers have been discontinued. So I had to go and get more, but yeah, that one is on deck. So if you guys enjoyed this, you're gonna absolutely love that. Make sure to check out these high build primers. I will leave links in the description for everything here on how you can get these primers. If you're looking for a faster and more efficient ways to finish your 3D prints with the best quality to match. But that's it for now, guys. I gotta get moving on to the next project. Make sure to give me a thumbs up, drop me a comment, and of course, don't forget to click the subscribe button. Until next time, it's DW out. Later.
I won't surrender. I will be